Hi everyone, this is the first lesson or first video of the new set work, which is the song Release by Afro Celt sound system. And this first video is going through the keywords exercise that's on the first page of your workbooks. So if you haven't already, you need to have written down the definitions of those keywords, and I'm just going to go through them and provide a few bits of extra information and examples to help you understand. Here we go. So looping is a technique where you repeat a pattern but you do it electronically. So this is sort of like a post-production way of repeating a pattern. A drone is sustained or repeated notes, so similar to a pedal note. A drone could be more than one note, sometimes it's two. You tend to get that on instruments like a bagpipe, which has a sounding note or two notes that go throughout the way the instrument's played. Nonsense lyrics, so as it says, words or sounds with no meaning. Okay, so that's sort of oohs and ahs. We've seen that in the Queen set work. It could also be a made-up language. Syllabic, we know we've spoken about in pretty much every set work that we've done. Okay, you can only talk about something being syllabic if there are words, so one note per syllable. Vocal samples. So it's basically where you take a sample, like you would in science, you take a small amount of a pre-recorded vocal. So it could be me on GarageBand loading up a song that was recorded in the 1950s and taking a small chunk of that and using it. Glissando. So glissando is a slide between two notes. So that'd be okay, so it's literally swooping between those notes. It can go up, it can go down. And the symbol for glissando looks like this. It's like a sort of a wavy line going between those two notes. So if you were, say, on a piano, okay, you would turn your fingers and you'd slide up and down the keyboard. A string instrument is fairly easy to do. You just use your left hand on the fingerboard, just slide up and down the note, and actually you get much more notes in between than you would do on a piano. Then we've got achakatura or akiakatura. I never quite know how to say it properly. And it's a type of ornament where a note is kind of crushed. Okay, the symbol looks like this. You can't see it very well, sorry. It's basically a small little extra, usually a quaver, with a line through it. If I make it smaller again, oh, where's it gone? There it is. So it's got a little line through that quaver. So it's da-da, ba-da. So you literally crush that note and move really quickly onto the main note that's written. Double stopping is a technique on string instruments where you play two strings at the same time. This is usually bowed string instruments where you can use a bow to play two at the same time. Reverb is a digital echo. So this is where something's recorded in a studio, say, and then a technique to give the impression of being in a different location would be reverb, which is like a digital echo. So it's done electronically. So you could make it feel as if the space that the piece was recorded in was much bigger, say a cathedral, where you get sound bouncing off the walls a lot more than you would if you were in a classroom. Okay, then, right. We've now got some texture words. So I'm going to go through them all and then we'll have another little look at something in a bit more detail. So heterophonic is a texture word that we haven't used yet. And this is the only set work in which this appears. It's where you have a simultaneous variation of the same melodic line. So imagine that you've got a line of music, say happy birthday, and then someone else sang happy birthday at the same time as you, which is quite often happens, maybe with a slightly altered rhythm or a slightly altered pitch. So some of the notes aren't quite in the same place or aren't quite the same pitch. So that's heterophonic. Homophonic, we know, is melody and accompaniment. That's the most common type of texture. And polyphonic is where you have two or more melodies played at the same time. So I've got a little diagram here to show you, just to go through it. So it's not in this piece, but monophonic, meaning one sound, is where you have one melodic line on its own. Homophonic texture, so you can see on the blue line there, we've got a melody, okay, so the main melodic line, with some kind of accompaniment underneath. So it could be chords, it could be something other than chords, another style of accompaniment, but it's not as important as the main melody. We've got polyphonic. Again, there is some slight variations of this polyphonic term, but it's basically where you have two or more melodies at the same time. And those two melodies can work in different directions and different relationships between the two. And then we've got the heterophonic there at the bottom, two or more simultaneously performing variations of the same melody. So you can see there that the blue and the red line are basically following the same shape. They're basically following the same shape, but there are some slight differences, some slight variations of that shape in terms of pitch. It could also be, like I said earlier, the rhythm. So that's the little example there to hopefully explain those types of texture to you. Then extended chords. So we know that chords are formed with the root, the third and the fifth of the scale. So 1, 3, 5. An extended chord is where you have extra notes on top, like a 7 or a 13. Remember that we don't go up to 15 because that would be the same as note number 1. Syncopation, offbeat rhythms. So that could be, you know, slightly swung rhythms. It could be, it's quite often a feature of Latin American music. Hence why we use that term when we were looking at Esperanza Spalding. Then we've got accents. So this is a sort of playing technique when music is written out. This symbol here, okay, this sort of, it's almost like a really small diminuendo, i.e. the sound is very loud at the beginning and then gets and dies off. This is where the symbol is used to emphasize or put attack on a particular note or a series of particular notes without changing the overall dynamic of that particular piece or that particular section. Okay, so it's literally, I could be talking along like this and go pow, and then I'll be back to my normal volume again. That's an accent. Ostinato, a repeated pattern. So we saw earlier the word looping. So same sort of definition, except an ostinato is written out. So if you had a sort of a more traditional piece of music, you would write out an ostinato. A loop is where you do that electronically. Modal, use of modes rather than more modern scales or keys. All right. So we know scales and keys like major and minor, and we have those set patterns of notes starting on a different root. So we could have A major, C major, D major, B minor, E minor, G minor. Okay. Before those scales were settled as being the norm, we had what we call modes. And here we are. So basically, modes are all the white notes going from one letter to an octave higher. So the Ionian mode, which is the top one there, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but I'm sort of circling it. That's actually the same as a C major scale. It's all the white notes from C to C. All right, so that has a pattern of a major scale. All right, the next one is Dorian. Okay, D for Dorian. So it's where you go through all the notes, all the white notes from D to D. So you don't get D major, which has an F sharp and a C sharp, and you also don't get D minor, which has a B flat. So it's not major and it's not minor, but it's all the white notes from D to D. So it gives a slightly different feel. And if you look through the rest of that diagram, you'll see that it's literally all the white notes from a letter to an octave higher. So we will look at those in a bit more detail when we look at the set work itself. But to point out, what you can do is take these modes. So the Dorian mode has, between all of those notes, a set pattern of tones and semitones based on the spacings of those white notes. You can then take that pattern of tones and semitones and then you could transpose it, so you then start on a different letter, and it wouldn't be all the white notes because it would be another one of these modes, but it would be the Dorian mode, but say in C. So using modes is actually a lot more flexible than using a key, because you can take each of these patterns and transpose it to all the other letters, all the other note names, say on a keyboard. So that's modes. And then back, the last one is ornamentation. So this is a musical decoration. It's a way of decorating a melody to make it more attractive or to add something to it. So I think that is all of the keywords. So for this task, it will be on Teams. What I'd like you to do is take a picture of that page of your work booklet and submit that as the evidence for you having completed this task. All right, see you later, guys.